Welcome back, everybody, and welcome to the panel debate that I've been looking forward to all morning. Women and the machine, is the future female? That's the question that we're going to be asking for the next 40 minutes. Now, I'd like to introduce our panel leader, Shelley Zallis. She's the founder of the Girls Lounge and one of the first, if not the first, female CEO of a top 25 research firm. So Shelley, I'll hand over to you to introduce our panelists.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. This is a really important conversation, I think, for all of us. And you saw the announcement, which is trending for Jaguar Land Rover, that by 2020, all cars will be electric. 2020 is actually a really important year because we celebrate the 100-year anniversary for women's rights to vote. So I love that 2020 is trending, especially for electric cars, and to thank you, Jaguar and Land Rover, for inviting us for this important conversation. And I think I want to start by saying, as a little introduction, I'm not sure why we still are having this conversation, truthfully. If diversity is good for business, which we clearly have all read about in every newspaper, throughout every periodical, online, offline, whatever media you use, it's clear diversity is good for business. And we also know that if we get this right, if we reach gender equality, we have the ability to add over $12 trillion to the global GDP by 2025. What is so complicated? According to McKinsey, if we keep going down the same trajectory that we are going, it will take over 118 years to reach gender equality. I don't know about you, but that seems like a hell of a long time for me. The other thing that is completely, overwhelming to me is why are we going backwards? We keep talking about gender equality as so important, and yet we are going backwards. The World Economic Forum measures gender equality in 144 countries. I live in Los Angeles. Out of 144 countries, do you know what number the United States is? Scream it out. 144. It's pretty bad. It's down there. It's 45. You know what number UK is? 20. You know what number Rwanda is? 5. So here we're still talking about this, and that metrics is measured on 4 key elements: on health, on education, on economy, and on politics. And so we have this opportunity to be better if we want to be better. So I would love to welcome our conversationalists today. I don't even think it's a debate. I think it's going to be a very heated conversation where we must create paradigm shift if we want to change and if we want to close this gap sooner than 118 years. So with that, I'd like to welcome Imogen. And Imogen, if you could, I know you all read the lengthy bios. Can you just give me a blurb of what you do and why this topic matters to you?
So I work at Jaguar Land Rover. I work with future model architectures, looking at how we incorporate the aerodynamics into our future models and how that sits within design. And I'm here because I really want to have this conversation with my niece when she's considering her A-levels. She's only 12 months at the moment, so that's a few years away. And I want her to think that it's utterly bizarre that we even had this occasion.
Fantastic. And Michelle?
Hi, I'm Michelle Kennedy. I'm CEO and co-founder of an app called Peanut, which connects women, like-minded women who happen to be mothers. I'm here today because obviously I'm representing the voice of the women of Peanut and also representing my little boy, who also will think it's bizarre that we're having this conversation in 10 years' time, I hope.
Fantastic. And Benita?
I'm here for 2 reasons. The first one is being president of the Women's Engineering Society, and we're going to be 100 years in 1919. If I look back on that time and the numbers of women and where they're performing, we've still got a long way to go. And ideally, you've got to question, well, why we've been still around. And secondly, I keep getting repeated questions being asked of me. how do I progress? How do I get into this sector? How do I make it fair and equitable wherever I may live and make sure that it's equivalent for both boys and girls, and that shouldn't actually be a gender discussion.
Fantastic. And David?
I'm here as the token man, and it makes a change, doesn't it, to have a token man instead of a token woman. Very pleased to be here. I'm here as the former Education and Employment Secretary in the UK Cabinet, and in that role I had responsibility for the Equal Opportunities Commission. And I'm also here because I'm really interested. My former wife, when we were getting into a bad spot 30 years ago, we went camping, and she opened the boot of the car and put the stereo on as loud as she could, and coming out of the stereo was Monica Wants to Be an Engineer. And I don't know whether we can find that song. I can't find it. I'm not going to sing it, but Monica Wants to Be an Engineer 30 years ago was a bit unusual.
Yeah. Well, and I think, this panel is called Woman and Machine, the Future is Female. First of all, how do men feel about that? Here I know that we are the minority in business, but gender equality is not a female issue. It is a social and economic issue. So just starting out of the gate, up for conversation, how do we feel about even talking about the future as female?
You asking me?
Sure. David?
I'm not frightened of it, if that's what you mean. I'm quite happy to embrace the idea that equality on occasions will mean that women are predominant in a whole range of areas of life. Men have got used to doing that. We're going to have to used to not being predominant. It doesn't actually mean that we all have to pretend to be women. And it doesn't mean that women have to pretend to be men. I think people need to be what they are and to be comfortable in their own skin. But it does mean that we don't make presumptions. We don't presume that a particular job will be for a male. Incidentally, it also works in terms of class. One of my sons was at a comprehensive school in Sheffield and didn't really know what his future was going to be until they introduced him to what was called the Formula One Challenge. And suddenly his life was transformed. And I think we need to look at how that can work for young women who are not quite sure what they want, and they're being pushed into traditional areas, and we've got to push them out. And that means putting back in art and design and technology much more predominantly in the curriculum. You won't know this, Shelley, but in our country we've invented something called the English Baccalaureate, which isn't a baccalaureate at all, but it's called the E-Bac. And we've taken out key art and design and technology from those key curriculum areas, and I think that's a catastrophe.
Well, I think it's talking about education, and we talk about STEM, and now you're adding arts and science, technology, engineering, math. Now we add the A, STEAM, and everyone is talking about putting art back in, to STEM. First, before we get into some of the solutions, I want to just ask you, why are we here? How did this, is it a legacy issue? Are there serious unconscious bias, issues preventing women from getting into the workforce? Because in technology, we're at lower rates. In every other industry, we entered about 50-50. We ended about 17% in the C-suite, and where we fall out is in the messy middle, in middle management. As women gain more responsibility at home, more responsibility at work, we see they start falling out. Why are we in this situation to begin with?
I think that starts from actually, as David was saying about the education, where we start seeing children from a very young age being shown to play with different toys, and you think that that doesn't happen. It absolutely does. You walk down the aisles of Toys R Us today, and you will see an aisle of dolls and pink, and you will see an aisle of blue and toys more relative to engineering or building things or cars. And that still does exist, and it's surprising and it's archaic, but it's absolutely true. Take that forward to education, and you see that girls are absolutely as engaged as boys in STEM subjects up until the age of 11, and then things start to kind of part ways. And whether that's because subconsciously there is bias, and we are showing boys different routes to girls, I think it really does start as early as that.
Well, actually, Toys R Us big news, I think, is going to start evolving that concept. And crazy enough, blue was actually for girls and pink was for boys.
That's right.
Because blue was the softer color and pink was the stronger color until the 1940s.
Yeah,
so that's
right.
when it actually shifted.
Yeah.
So if it starts at a young age, I mean, in at least the United States, STEM in public school system is elective. And so boys go into it and girls are intimidated because they're the minority. So what are you finding in terms of, STEM education? How are we going to get more girls at a younger age, to participate in STEM programs?
So I think that engineering is fundamentally about trial and error and getting things wrong and learning from your mistakes. It's all about design, build, test. And I think that's something that boys' toys are very much geared towards. And I think also when boys make mistakes or they're naughty, there's this sort of concept of, oh, their boys will be boys, they'll grow out of it. Whereas I think girls are quite often encouraged to be these sort of perfect, get things right individuals, which is something that just doesn't sit well with an engineering mindset. And so I think personally, we need to really encourage girls to make mistakes and enjoy making mistakes and understanding where they've gone wrong. And I think once we address that in education, then I think it will maintain interest towards GCSEs and A-levels.
Well, I think also there was a big, I think it was Harvard Business Review that talked about if there's a job that requires you having skills in 10 areas, if a guy can do 6 out of 10, he's like, yep, I got this. And if, a girl doesn't think she could do 10 out of 10, it's not for me, I'm not qualified. And I think those are the kinds of things that we also need to give permission, without apology to move ahead on. I think that's a very good point. What do you think, Benita, from your experiences?
My experiences, I'm going to use a recent TV show. It was on the BBC, where they were talking about making sure that gender isn't specific for girls and boys. And it was enlightening, really. It was looking at children who were 7 and getting them to almost stereotypically stop them doing what was boys and girls. So making the toilets non-gender, not gender specific, non-gender. Also getting children to do spatial work as well. So some of the girls felt scared. Some of them felt scared about doing maths. Some of them really had this anxiety at 7. So you can see that there's a certain level of inhibition that needs to be opened out and considered. And then if we look into secondary school and results, girls' schools by default produce more engineers, more scientists, because there is this inherent element of can't do, not sure, doubt. And we need to be encouraging almost parents to take one step further and saying, let's not gender specify, be it toys, but also encourage that sense of have a go, try. It doesn't matter. Let's just, if a girl wants to do netball, get them to have a go at football as well. Let them go and try different things and try sailing, try non-gender sports, because let's look at sports. Which sport would I look at? I'd say tennis is the only one where it's fair and equitable in the pay bracket. But there aren't very many that I could say is equal in that whole arena.
There's a new movie coming out, Billie Jean King and Bobby Riggs, which is going to be very exciting. US Open's going on right now.
Absolutely.
But that's very true, and especially with gender fluidity today. I mean, I come from the survey business. I mean, I don't even know that you can ask, are you male or female? They're adding other. And, a lot of bathrooms are becoming gender neutral. So that's why I don't really talk about gender anymore. I talk about not even male or female, but the masculine and feminine talent pool, because they are quite different. Mm-hmm. The masculine being linear and analytic and bold and assertive, and the feminine being emotive and nurturing and empathetic and passionate. And I think we need all of this talent in the talent pool for STEM careers and for any kind of careers. And I want to go to you, David, for this one. And, we talked about this a little earlier, but, being blind, you don't look at what color someone is with race. How do you evaluate, talent in your world?
Well, firstly, you have to avoid other people's presumptions. I was just telling you before we started about being on a beach, walking along a beach in Barbados, and a guy with an incredible Barbadian accent coming and talking to me, and the people who were with me presumed that I needed to know that he was white, not black. I didn't really need to know whether he was white or black, but we make presumptions that we then impose. And I've been thinking a lot about this before coming. My wife's a doctor. Now, actually, if you think about it, there's a very large number of women going into medicine in the UK. I'm sure it's true across the globe as well. Actually, you're into all sorts of areas that in other parts of our industry and our services, you'd consider these were male preserves. I mean, if you're a doctor, you're involved in the kind of diagnostics, the kind of robotics these days, the kind of keyhole surgery, which you'll be doing, actually, correct me if I'm wrong, but in making cars and repairing engines and getting involved in electronics. But people in school, in careers advice, they sort of say, oh, well, that's fine. You know, you want to be a doctor, young woman, that's going to be absolutely great. They don't say, well, why don't you try going through in Sheffield, the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre. We're making a big effort at the University of Sheffield to get people in there. We're not doing as well as the Advanced Forms Research Centre in Strathclyde. Scotland are doing quite well at this, actually, believe it or not. I mean, people think of Scotland being pretty macho, you know, and all this kind of stuff. They're actually doing a lot better. And even in Germany, because I took a look at this as well, Siemens in Berlin, working with the kind of things we're doing in Sheffield, have still only got 5% of their workforce as women. And I think that's something we really got to have a go at, because role models make all the difference.
Yeah.
I totally agree. First of all, I want to welcome Cosby. I didn't welcome Cosby. Everyone say hello.
Yeah,
to
I'm afraid he's
Cosby.
the extra male on the
Well, that's good. We have a question from the audience here, and this is for you, Imogen. What's the percentage of women in Jaguar Land Rover globally?
So I think we're currently at 11%. The national average is 9%, so we are an improvement on that. But actually, I don't think it's as simple to answer as that. If we look at our recent intakes, the statistics are far more like 50-50. However, we are a legacy business. We're lucky enough that some people have careers spanning 40 years. And so these sorts of initiatives will take time, but we're very much heading in the right direction.
You know, I was on tour with the vets. I brought a lot of young girls in STEM to make artificial limbs, prosthetics for women, you know, because while for men and women utility is the same, move your arm, move your leg, cosmetic is utility for women. They go through severe depression, and it was amazing, you know, creating tattoo art and all these kinds of amazing things, you know, with STEM. And at that time, a Nobel laureate came out with a statement that women and men should not work in labs together because they were #distractingly sexy. And, you know, so I got all the girls to stand in line, and I took all of our t-shirts, and we took pens, not very sophisticated, and we wrote #distractingly smart. And we just changed the conversation. So I want to get to, you know, and David, you said this, everything is not so bleak. We're not just going backwards. We've made a lot of improvements. Can we talk about some things that are working? How are we creating a paradigm shift? How do we move from talking about unconscious bias to maybe talking about conscious diversity? Like, can we start pushing this conversation into the positive instead of always the negative? What do you think is working today? Some ideas.
I think one of the ideas is we are talking more about flexible working. We are talking about job sharing, and that conversation is starting to be had for both, and it's not gender dependent. There is this assumption that it's automatically going to be a woman who will seek this, but I do feel that with the next generation and the younger people who are coming into the marketplace, they're asking for that more and more. So the demands are changing, and that's actually where it's going to be moving at a quicker pace.
So let's go to flexibility. Michelle, this is perfect for you. I mean, running an online community with moms, you know, that chat amongst themselves and get advice. What are you hearing in the chat groups? You know, let us know. What are they saying, you know, moms in the workplace? I mean, is it getting better for them? Are we culturally evolving to make it a place that all people can thrive?
Yeah, so looking actually, first of all, within my team, so my head of mobile engineering is a woman who is a mummy of 2, and she is brilliant. She's just completed her PhD in machine learning on the side whilst building Peanut and doing everything else in her personal life. And for her, speaking to her before I came here today, what she was saying was the most important shift is it is no longer about whether I can be in the office coding till 3 a.m. because I simply can't. But what I can do is go home, put my girls to bed and start coding again and be doing what I love doing, just not having to have that face time. And I think that's really important. When you talk more widely and you think about the women from Peanut around me, I started life way back when as a corporate lawyer, and it was absolutely about leaving your jacket on the back of your chair so that the partner didn't know that you'd gone home for the evening. And fast forward and working in tech, and it was absolutely about, you know, being in with the devs and making sure that you were also up till 2 a.m. drinking Red Bull and eating hula hoops and really being part of the process. And things are evolving and things are moving on. I think that culturally it is more acceptable to have working from home days. We're always online. We have our phones with us all the time. Actually, that's a hard part, and that's something that we probably need to work harder on to make sure that we are getting that time away from the office because it's constantly with us. But I think the real shift is more about having conversations around why it's beneficial to have flexible working, why it's beneficial to have shared parental leave, and the benefits that that can bring. If we look at countries in the Nordic, they're all about having shared parental leave. And the benefits... By
the way, they're 1, 2, and 3 on the World
They
Economic
are,
Forum.
yes, I know. I read that too.
Yeah.
So I think that because of that, because they are focused on this shared parental leave, as you actually said at the top, it's not a female issue, it's an everyone issue. And that includes being able for all parents to be involved in childcare so that you don't have to be in the office at 3 a.m. But if you want to be, you can be doing it at home or wherever it is.
That's awesome. I got a question I want to ask everyone. What do you think about obligatory quotas considering women in technology-based positions? I mean, do we believe in quotas to up the ante?
Quotas have certainly not worked in terms of issues around disability, partly because it's what you do before the quotas kick in. We've talked a lot about education, quite rightly. It's what happens in those early years, the presumptions that are made, the guidance that's given, the role models that exist. And by the time you get to a quota, people will just look up in the air and say, well, there's no one suitable. And there's no one suitable because they haven't been facilitated in getting to that level. I'd like to see real investment in conversion, because if you talked about 118 years on the present trajectory to get to equality. If we're going to do something about changing the role model, changing the perception, changing people's idea about what is cool to be in, we're going to have to do some pretty rapid conversions of what people during their working life from what they're doing now to what they might suddenly discover they were good at. I'm doing some work chairing a task force with Heathrow for the expansion of the Heathrow airport, and we're determined to try and get diversity and change into this. And we've been looking around at what's working in things like civil engineering projects. And Tideway here in London, a very big civil engineering project, have actually got conversion programs to specifically attract women in a way that wouldn't have been the case before. It's always happened with law. People take a degree in one area and then they do a conversion, it's called a DGL at the moment, before they can qualify as a solicitor. Why can't we put resource into that so that we can see some real movement, giving bursaries for women to be able to change careers, change professions in midstream?
And I'd go one step further and say that there has to be also conversions from other sectors, but conversion within engineering as well, so moving from manufacturing to construction to tech to whatever, to allow that ability to be creative. We need more creativity and more diversity of thought in getting us to actually consider alternatives. And going back with that Thames Tideway example, I would also say that what happens at the end of that project? Where do all these women go? Where are they actually going to be? What's their trajectory? What will that happen to them? Because we also do know that 40% of women do leave after their degrees. It's just not always practical for them to be either operating in their field, but a lot of them want to come back. And it could well be that it's circumstances, and it may not be childcare. It's just that it may well they have elderly relatives or a whole host of other things that impact on them. And I think we need to allow companies to consider breaks as a means of saying, well, and what have you done? How have you actually then used your time? And give people a soft start, not saying that you are not capable. You have the mental ability and the agility to shift into another arena. And it's practicing, and in a safe environment. Don't leave them to flounder and then say they've failed as a general. Try and actually help them along.
Yeah, I mean, what I've seen is, you know, like I said, 50-50 enter the workforce, except in tech, they don't. And a lot of these stories with, you know, sexism in the tech world is a real deterrent. But I want to go back to Imogen, a question for you, which is how are you are not using the quota system, you are recruiting using a technique called gorillas,
Yeah,
I am
so
blown away by.
I have to say it's absolutely amazing. It was launched in June this year, and it's a virtual reality app which invites participants to crack a code, and if they do so, then they will be fast-tracked through to an interview process. What I really, really love about this is that it's not asking for a specific set of qualifications. It's not even asking for a specific set of skills. It's purely looking at a particular mindset and whether that can blend well within our organisation. I think we've had to really sit up and recognise that we're not just about mechanical engineering, we're not just about powertrains. Our industry is starting to span so many other industries, and we need to attract that diversity, not just women, but graphic engineers, software engineers, mechanical engineers. We need everyone. So I think I'm just really inspired at how diverse we can be with that approach.
Because you're recruiting by talent.
Yeah.
You're recruiting for talent, which is, so let's get to another question, which is a perfect segue. So thank you, everyone in the audience. But do you think there's a difference between male and female engineers?
No. In short, I think fundamentally people, and this is people, this is not men or women, have different approaches to problem solving. And I think when you have a culture which is predominantly male, certain patterns sort of manifest. And I think it's amazing when you bring somebody different into that arena and people are able to approach the problem in a slightly different way. And I think that this is really, really important as we look at our industry as a whole, and particularly when we look at things like machine learning, so that we create that across the board so that we're not unconsciously building in our unconscious biases. So I don't think we're different. I just think that any team benefits from a variety of opinions.
So we need diversity of thought from both sides, you know, to make the world go around. You know, there's a great film called Hidden Figures, because one of the things we're also lacking is role models. You know, you can only be what you can see, and if we see more women in engineering, do you think that would, you know, improve more women wanting to get into the field? And this question, David, was really for you, asking about how do you get more girls in STEM in the school systems?
Well, I think we've got to teach physics in an entirely different way to begin with. It's a massive turn-off at the moment. Secondly, we've got to restore some form of assessment about teamwork. And we've just in the UK, in England, because it applies only to England, restored what used to exist when I was taking examinations, which was fine because I had a very good memory at the time, which was the final exam. After 2 years of doing an A-level, you take a final exam. Actually, throwing out the assessment completely. For some of these maths and engineering, physics, chemistry, actually having some assessment and getting people's awareness of how to work in a team would be beneficial. And the reason that males have done better in the summer A-levels this year in Britain is because males like final exams. They like going for the 2 years and then going for the last rush. Whereas women were much better at assessment. and you can't duck it. We've just buggered it up, actually.
Well, I think another question that came in.
I'm sorry about that.
No, we like that you said
could
women
delete
were
that on
better.
the
That's what I heard. I think another question, which is a great question, why do women struggle to break out of middle management? And so do we want to take a shot at that one? Benita?
I'll have a go. I think there are a couple of things. One is knowing what the underlying culture is. You get to a certain point, and we have got analysis, a lot of analysis on this, where women will sometimes compromise having children, their families, or whatever else, and then find that there's a glass ceiling. But what they're not finding is a means of getting the informal conversations going, getting people to have the, who are their allies, who are their supporters, where they need to go, and actually networking outside of their work environment to influence how they can progress, or consciously saying, let me move. I think men are more ballsy per se and say, I'm not getting it, I'm going to move, I'm going to have a go. And I think women are a little bit more cautious in taking some of those bold steps. Maybe that's what we need to do a little bit more of, in saying, okay, I've had my time here, but the problem is when women do, they're branded alpha male, or they're branded, and those are negative stereotypes, which we just need to be saying, well, no, it's more that it's not working for me here. I want to be able to move somewhere else and actually then see how I can attain my potential. And I equally want to progress. There are studies that are that have been branded where women are, men have asked, or certainly their seniors have asked and said, I didn't appreciate you wanted to progress and become senior. I didn't appreciate, and it's almost like, well, why shouldn't you if you've actually attained, gone so far, to actually then carry on forward?
I think there are also policy decisions around that as well, because when you've been in an organisation for a certain amount of time and you want to think about, for example, having a family, you need maternity leave. And if you are leaving your current position to go and join another company, you start from day zero all over again. And so time of life is a factor. I've been working at this organisation for X number of years. If I move, it will take me another 2 years before I'm entitled to maternity leave. So all of those factors also are kind of instrumental. And actually, it's a point you touched on, and Isabel touched on earlier, about that fear of failure. And I do think there is a very strong fear of failure amongst women. We talk about it a lot in our office. We have an even split of engineers on our team, so half male, half female, and they work amazingly together. But there is a fear more generally, and not inside our engineering team, of getting it wrong, because I think we constantly tell women and young girls, work hard and you'll do well. You can have anything if you work hard. And there's something that is associated with failure that means that you haven't worked hard enough, rather than you've had a go. You've broken something and now you're going to try again.
I just had a curiosity.
Can keep you at middle
I
management.
want to just, because we have to wrap, I just had a curiosity in the audience. How many of you men have ever been told you're too bossy? No one. How many women in this audience have been told they're too bossy? Raise your hand high. Okay, so Sheryl Sandberg says that you're not too bossy. It's called executive presence. And Beyonce says, I'm not bossy, I'm the boss. So I think that when we talk about, Benita, the to this and to that, and there are big challenges, especially in middle management, where women do try to act like men because they want to fit into the boys' club, well documented.
And Shelley, that's about building confidence. Confidence isn't the same thing as aggression. And the more confident that you are, the less aggressive and the more successful you are in actually demonstrating in practice leadership skills. And I think we can engender those. You can't just invent them out the air, but you can engender that in the way that we approach the development of management and the internal ways in which people are encouraged and supported.
I want to 100%. So thank you for that. I coined a phrase, confidence is beautiful. It's not what you look like on the outside, it's how you feel on the inside. And if you don't feel good about yourself, you certainly can't lead others. Last one, because I think we have 1 second to wrap. To what degree is the media reinforcing gender inequality? Is the media, let's not assume it is. So is the media reinforcing, and if so, to what degree? Quick one, because I got to wrap.
I think it does. I think particularly for young children, I think girls in films who are good at maths are often shown to be the nerds. But I think we are doing a lot to address that. We had a campaign earlier this year with Getty Images to show what actually being a female in the workplace actually looks like, rather than the male in a hard hat on a building site.
Quick wrap, lightning round. What's your one wish? Give me a wish. Wish in the workplace. Michelle.
That we're not having this conversation in 5 years' time.
Benita.
Every team should be a mixed team, whatever you happen to be doing.
David.
Lifelong careers to be restored right the way from the very early years all the way through when people are in work.
Imogen.
Encourage mistakes and learning from those mistakes.
Awesome. Okay, that's it. Thank you everyone for participating in this conversation. Your questions were excellent.